Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Courtney Honeycutt, and I am the coordinator of pre-graduate school advising in the Office of Academic and Advising Services. And today we are going to talk about how to find funding for a graduate school or post-baccalaureate study. I'm going to try and introduce you to a lot of different resources, a lot of avenues you maybe have or have not thought of, and we'll talk a little bit more about what each type of funding looks like, and how they might be helpful to you. If you have a question at any point, feel free to unmute yourself and just ask away. I don't mind the interruption or anything like that. And of course, I'll pause for questions at the end as well. So there are a bunch of different types of graduate funding for graduate school. They come in forms usually of graduate assistantships, fellowships, which can be both internal and external. And what I mean by that is an internal fellowship would be a fellowship that's offered either through the college or the individual department that you're applying to get a graduate degree at. The same is true for scholarships. You can get them internally through that department or college, or for either one, you can get an external fellowship or scholarship. These are scholarships that are offered by the government, by a company or another organization to help you fund your graduate studies. Another type is employer benefits, and this isn't something that a lot of people think about. So if you haven't thought about it before, I would definitely encourage you to do so. And I'll talk more about what that can look like in a bit. And then the last choice is student loans. A lot of times this isn't ideal, obviously, especially if you have already taken out student loans for undergrad. And in a lot of cases, you may have heard, don't go to graduate school if you're paying for it yourself. Sometimes that's true, but there are situations in which that is not true. And I'll talk about that when we get a little bit later as well. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and talk about it now. So sometimes when you get a graduate degree at the master's level in particular, you are getting what's called a professional master's degree. And what this means is that the master's degree you would be earning directly qualifies you for a specific profession or a specific field. Some examples of this are the MBA, which puts you straight into the marketing and accounting fields. Another example would be, for example, LMFT, or Marriage and Family Therapist degree. This qualifies you to be a licensed counselor once you pass that exam. You could get a master's degree for dietetics and nutrition. This would qualify you to be a nutritionist, a registered nutritionist. Those are the kinds of things I'm talking about. And with these particular professional master's degrees, a lot of the understanding comes from it being a return of investment type of deal, in the sense that you invest into your education towards this career by paying for graduate school, and it enables you to earn more throughout the time of your career, and hence a high return of investment. So in those cases, it can be a lot harder to get, especially graduate assistantships. Some fellowships and scholarships will be more limited, so they're not completely unavailable. And you may find that you have to look towards student loans. But again, that's the idea for that, is that you are getting a high return of your investment. And I'll actually show you one way you can look into that, see if that's really what's true for your career field. And what you can do is you can actually go to the Department of Education website. The Board of Education. Okay. The Bureau of Labor Statistics. So when you get to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, you can search whatever career or profession you're looking into and see what the outlook for that profession is. So I'm just going to use an accountant as an example, so maybe an MBA. So you search there and you have accountants and auditors. That seems accurate. And what you're going to be able to find here is a lot of valuable information at the get-go. Their median pay, $71,000 per year. This means across the nation. The usual typical entry-level amount of education, so you can get in with a bachelor's degree. The amount of growth, this is really important, so it's growing at a rate of 4% per year. meaning there's going to be 4% more jobs each year, which is important to you. And you can learn more about what they do, the work environment, some similar occupations. Financial managers will be a good one to look at, or rather you can see, what kind of degrees they come. And usually you earn more with a master's degree. So this is the kind of research you can do even if you're not getting a professional master's degree, to look at what you can be doing with your degree, graduate or undergraduate, and get some idea of what it looks like in your typical environment. I'll just show one more, like nutritionist, because I know this one requires at least a master's degree. Okay, so yeah, it lists the bachelor's degree as well. But to be licensed, which is really important, and this is actually becoming more important in this field in particular, you have to have the master's degree. Okay. So going back to, were you all able to see that website I pulled up? Can I get a quick yes from someone in chat or in person? I might have done the share screen wrong. Yes or no? Cool, thanks for the thumbs up. Okay, so back to our slideshow. I've talked about student loans and when those might or might not be needed. But I'm gonna focus today mostly on the other types of funding that you can get, because student loans are usually your last resort. So the first one is a graduate assistantship. Some of you may have heard of this term and know all about it. Some of you have heard it but don't know what it is. Maybe you haven't heard of it at all. A graduate assistantship is essentially having employment with the university that you will be studying at. And this can be a part-time position. Usually you'll work 10 or 20 hours somewhere in between for your graduate assistantship. And what it gives you in return is a tuition waiver or remission, even for out-of-state students. So that's key for a lot of folks. So you're getting an employment and you're not paying tuition, and you're not paying, you're not paying minimal fees each semester, at least minimal compared to the tuition. You might be looking at $800 to $1,200 a year to pay in fees, as opposed to, I don't know, $15,000, $25,000 a year. Like I said, you have low semester fees, and on top of not paying tuition, you most often are going to see a stipend as well that you would receive throughout the semester, throughout the year, while you're serving in that graduate assistantship. One thing I'll say about these stipends is that they can vary widely in how much you actually get. As you will probably not be surprised, these stipends tend to be a lot higher at the PhD level as opposed to the master's level. And even then, they're a lot higher in STEM fields than they are in non-STEM fields. And this is because that's where a lot of the money is and the funding goes with education. That's not to say that you can't get a graduate assistantship in a non-STEM field. You might just not be making as much as your fellow engineer as a graduate student. But you're waiving the same tuition, which is great. I will also note that sometimes those stipends can be hard to live on their own. So you may still need to either take out some loans to support yourself or take on a part-time job as well to be able to make ends meet. Another option is always get a lot of roommates and split costs that way. Something to think about. There are different types of graduate assistantships as well. The three main ones are research, teaching, and grading assistantships. There are some other categories as well. You might be an administrative graduate assistant or a laboratory graduate assistant, and that would depend on the department you're working for. As an example of an administrative graduate assistantship, our department, Academic and Advising Services, has a graduate assistant who works with us on orientation and on UNV 101, and they work throughout the summer and help us organize these things. And they are an administrative assistant. So we've had someone who was getting an MBA be this graduate assistant. We've had someone who's getting higher education leadership degree. So that's a little bit of a variety there. And then the other types of research means you will likely be working directly with a faculty member who is conducting research at that department, and you'll be working on their team in the lab. You'll be their research assistant. This is usually the most well-paid assistantship in terms of stipend because it comes from funding that already exists for that faculty member to run their project. It's also a really coveted position because it puts you really close to that faculty member who is also probably going to be advising your own research that you're working on towards your degree. If you're not doing research, then you won't be able to get a research graduate assistantship. But if you are, these are really excellent to have. The others are teaching and grading. Usually teaching pays a little bit more than grading, but they're somewhat similar. As a teaching assistant, you may be teaching introductory level undergraduate courses in your field of study. So that could be accounting 204, that could be sociology 101, or sometimes in the sciences, they'll have you running the undergraduate labs. So you might be running the Bio 212 lab, for example, and that would be your teaching assistantship. The other one, and then grading is a little bit less of a responsibility than that. You would be grading for a professor, potentially creating quizzes and grading those for them, or creating PowerPoints as more of a grading assistant or a class assistant than teaching. You wouldn't have actual teaching responsibilities, so those pay a little bit less. One thing I'll note in terms of getting these assistantships, and this is especially important for the humanities folks or the non-STEM folks, when you're looking for these assistantships, especially those in the other category, administrative assistantships, you can look, you'll want to look beyond the admissions page or beyond your department's page. A lot of times universities will list graduate assistantship positions on their job board. If you're looking for employment at the university, sometimes assistantships are listed there. You can also talk to an office the office for graduate students or the employment office on campus and ask them if they know of assistantships available. So you have to do a little bit of networking to find these. And lastly, if you have particular experience in a department area, say maybe you were a tutor or an SI leader, or maybe you worked as an RA and you want to try and do a Res Life assistantship, reach out to those departments and let them know that you're an incoming graduate student and see if they have anything available. They might not, or it might be filled by students they already know, but it's worth a try, right? And in terms of research assistantships, the easiest way to get a research assistantship is to talk to the faculty member you want to work with before you apply for that graduate program. I highly encourage this for students interested in research, because when you're applying to a graduate school, you don't just want to look for a good program, you want to look for a good program that has faculty members doing the kind of research you want to do. Otherwise, they're not going to have someone who can guide you in your own research, and that's not going to be a good program for you. So when you're looking to apply to that program, look at the faculty, see what they're researching. If you like it, email them or call them. Let them know you're a prospective graduate student interested in their research. Tell them about yourself, what research you've done, and ask for more information. This is huge. Worst case scenario, they don't respond to you. Best case scenario, and I've seen this happen multiple times, is that the faculty member responds. Perhaps you talk on the phone, you build a rapport, and they decide they want you on their research team. When they look at they pull for your application when you apply, and they say, I want that student for my research assistantship, and you're golden. So don't be afraid to do that kind of networking. If you're not sure how to get started, let me know, and we can talk through what exactly you can say to a faculty member or that kind of thing. Okay. I kind of already went, internal fellowships and scholarships. So like I said, they're offered by the department or the program you're applying for. They're not, sometimes they have university-wide graduate fellowships or scholarships you might be considered for, but usually they're specifically within the department you'll be studying in. Sometimes they come from an endowment or a donation that a previous alumnus or student has donated to the department, and they award them to students, usually based on merit, sometimes based on merit and or financial need. When you apply to a department, you may want to ask them in advance whether they have additional fellowships and scholarships available, and if you have to apply for them separately, or if you'll be considered for them automatically when you apply. A lot of departments do already automatically consider all their applicants for the fellowships and scholarships they have available, but just in case, you don't want to miss out on an opportunity. So definitely, look through their website, reach out and ask, and make sure there's not anything you're missing. And some fellowships are going to be full funding. They're going to cover your tuition and board. You're going to get a stipend. Some of them are going to be more of a partial funding. So you might have a scholarship for $3,000 a year. It's not going to cover your whole bill, but every little bit counts. Even if you get an assistantship, you should still be looking for these fellowships and scholarships, because the more money you have, the less you have to worry about making ends meet, having enough food, paying your rent, and the more comfortable you can be knowing you're secure and can focus on your studies. So always look for more. unless you're given one of the golden fellowships that gives you so much money and so much funding that they require you not to have any other sources of funding during that graduate degree. If you get one of those, then you won't be able to get other sources of funding. But most likely you'll want to combine as many different fellowships, scholarships, assistantships as you can get. So external fellowships and scholarships, and this is where it gets interesting. These are offered usually by another company or organization or some other institution like government institutions. And some examples include the NSF, which is the National Science Foundation's fellowship, or there's a NASA fellowship, the Fulbright Fellowship, which I'm sure some of you have heard of. Another one is called the GANN, that's GANN, and that's actually a need-based and merit-based fellowship. So it gives particular priority to students who might not be able to attend graduate school without it. It is focused in the sciences, but it's an interesting one. If you are in the sciences, check it out. And so I'm going to take you to our website to tell you how you can go about trying to find these, because it can be difficult to navigate where they are. So I've sort of compiled some resources for you all. I'm going to close out of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And if you go to our website, aas.mercer.edu, you can find on the left navigation, pre-graduate and professional school advising, come down to pre-graduate school programs, and then resources. Obviously use these other tools if you think they are applicable to you and will be helpful, but I'm going to focus on resources right now. When you scroll down on the resources page, about halfway, you'll see some information about funding graduate school. What I have listed here are a bunch of links to some databases, some specific scholarships or fellowships, a lot of different areas that you can comb through to see what you might qualify for. And my personal recommendation is go through all the fellowships that you can and apply for each and every one of them that you meet the minimum requirements for, whatever they are. And the reason for this is you don't want to leave money sitting on the table. And the other more practical reason, well, money is practical, but another reason is that when you're making your application to graduate school, usually what that application requires is an application form online, which is usually pretty basic, letters of recommendation, transcript, and a personal statement. Those 4 things are going to be almost exactly what you need to apply for a fellowship. So if you're already doing all that work applying to graduate schools, it's not going to be that much harder to take it and maybe modify your statement a little bit if you need to and just put it into a fellowship application. So I recommend you do these things sort of at the same time. I'm going to show you through some of these. This top one listed, I have it listed at top for a reason. UCLA has put together a database of fellowships. It's called the GRAPES database. I'm actually going to go there now. That is just a huge source of all kinds of funding that is available. You can narrow it down by a lot of different filters as well. So you can do by amount. I would choose all, but if you're wanting a specific amount, you can look for it. The academic level is particularly important here because you can, if you know you're not getting a doctoral degree, you can automatically switch to master's thesis. You can look at prospective graduate students as well. This can mean that, and the reason why there's prospective here and there's current graduate students is they make that distinction because, believe it or not, you can still get fellowships while you're already a graduate student. So if you don't get as much as you need this for, when you're getting accepted, keep looking and keep applying as you go through your graduate degree each year, if not each semester, because you may start qualifying for different fellowships or higher level fellowships or scholarships based on your continuing qualifications in that degree. So never stop looking for fellowships unless you're comfortably funded and you're just going to be comfortable with that, but always keep looking if you need any more funding. You can look at your divisions. This is helpful. Women and minorities, persons with disabilities, obviously for their own students. And then if you're not a permanent resident or you're not a U.S. citizen, you might want to narrow by, U.S. citizenship not required. That might be important for you. But for right now, we're going to look at, I'm just going to go through some to give you some examples. We're going to look at all, and I want to look for, let's look, master's thesis. I think that's most common usually when I get folks looking at graduate school. And let's say, well, does someone want to share what they're attending graduate school for? And we can look for some fellowships. It's okay if you don't want to. Okay. We're going to go with biology. So health sciences or physical sciences. We're going to leave life sciences. Yeah, not physical sciences. So we're going to leave those two checked, and we're going to see what there is. So this is to go study in Australia. You don't want to do that. You know, you can come through these pre-doctoral fellowship. That's interesting. Oh, this is the next one I spoke about. So, you know, you can just filter these down and go through them. And when you go and look at a particular fellowship, you're not going to straight go to the application. It's going to tell you when it's due, the amount, if there's a stipend. You know, it says additional support for tuition and travel. That's key. If you think you're going to want to present at conferences or do even exchange study abroad or exchange programs, you're going to want support for travel. This is a big boon. It's only open to U.S. citizens, so that's a restriction. It's a fellowship or a grant, which are pretty interchangeable. Gives you contact information, the requirements. Again, if you meet the minimum, apply. Academic level, current graduate student. Okay, so you know, maybe you flag this one to apply after your first semester or your first year as a graduate student. I apologize if you can hear my cat. But yeah, so these are the kinds of things, and then you'll be able to apply on website, or you can save it as a favorite. So you can actually make an account here and just save a bunch of these and go do them all at once if you want, or save them for the next year. Another one I want to point out in particular is the Harvard's resources for MBA funding. And the reason why I want to show you this one is because a lot of students are going into professional master's fields, and they're hard to find fellowships for. But Harvard did put together this list of areas or places you might find funding for an MBA, which is usually the hardest kind of degree to fund. A lot of them are dependent on sort of, you know, fitting into specific categories. So, you know, LGBTQ students or, you know, students of business disciplines, that's anyone who wants an MBA, right? So that's a good one. Farm working backgrounds is interesting. I actually have a family member who's taking advantage of one of those. You know, all of these are good resources to look through. And I'll just go through, let's do women in accounting. So there's Association of University of Women that provides funding. Perfect. You can go check them out, see what's available, apply for anything you qualify for. And so you see this is a specific association as well. If you happen to get external fellowships for your undergraduate degree from certain organizations, go ahead and go back to them and see if they have graduate versions of those fellowships, and see if you can qualify for those as well. It never hurts to look. Okay, let's go back. All right. Any questions so far? Just moving right along. Okay. So there's a little bit of a difference between a fellowship and a scholarship. Sometimes a fellowship requires you to fulfill specific components. For example, the GAN I mentioned earlier requires you to have a teaching component to your fellowship. So you would have to, or for example, serve as a teaching assistantship or teach a lower level course as part of that fellowship. And the reason for that is with the GAN, what they want to do is educate American citizens in the STEM fields who are also then potentially going to be teaching this area of study to more American citizens because of the sort of lack of higher level researchers we have in the STEM areas in the US. Typically speaking, a fellowship can be used for all of your costs as a student. So you're looking at tuition, fees, but also your room and board, which might be, you know, your rent, your living expenses. It's a pretty broad category. Scholarships are more often specifically used for tuition fees and maybe books or other supplies. And those are non-taxable because of that restriction. Fellowship stipends, however, may be taxable. So that if you do get a fellowship and you're not sure, that might be a good question to ask or to consult an accountant about or a tax professional. I don't know the answer. It's different for each one, but just something to be aware of. A lot of, you know, scholarships can be need-based, merit-based, or you can get them through an organization membership or a contest. You know, you can get scholarships a lot of different ways. Fellowships are most often merit-based, and they're usually prestigious on some level and competitive. Even within, you know, if you're applying as an LGBTQ plus student for their fellowship offered by those organizations, they may still do merit-based within that application, or they might do merit and need-based. So you might have to demonstrate financial need. Those are things to be considerate of. Okay, the last one here other than student loans is employer funding. There are a lot of ways to have an employer help you pay for graduate school. So to do this, you would obviously have to take at least a gap year after undergraduate, after you're earning your undergraduate degree, so that you would have an employer to help you fund something. Um, I always, I always want to encourage you, do not be afraid to take a gap year or several gap years. It's not even called a gap year. Just take some time doing something else. That is okay. Graduate school will always be there for you. You know, give it aside from any unexpected circumstances, right? You'll always have that option. Um, and it doesn't hurt you to apply to graduate school like 8 years after you went to undergrad. If it's an area where you really have to know some particulars, you might have to brush up on your math equations or your physics knowledge or whatever it is. You might have to touch up on it, but you don't have to be fresh out of undergrad to get into that graduate program. And a lot of times it's better to take some time off. And that could be because maybe you're feeling burnt out from school. Let me tell you, going from being burnt out in undergrad straight into burnout in graduate school is not a good choice because graduate school is a lot more stressful. It's a lot more work in a different way. It's not what you're used to. It's not going to be just a continuation of your undergraduate degree. It's going to be different, and you're going to be more responsible for a lot of other things in your life as well. So if you're tired and you just need to be done for a while, consider taking a break. It can only help you at that point. In some fields, it's often better to take some time to work in the field before you get a graduate degree. An MBA is an excellent example. You can get an MBA straight after out of undergrad, but some programs even restrict it to people who have at least a year of working experience. And the reason for this is once you get some work experience in that field, you'll know what you actually want from an MBA and what you want to earn and learn from it, what you want to do after it. And that's hard to grasp in such a broad field if you go into the MBA straight from your undergraduate degree. So in that case, it would be an advantage. Law school is kind of similar. It's not necessarily a given advantage, but the more life experiences you have in applying to law school, the better. It's only going to help you. Another choice. So a lot of corporations will pay for your graduate school, especially in the business field, which is why I mentioned the MBA. So you might be going out to get work experience for your MBA, and you're also ending up working for a company that has, a tuition benefit for their employees. Maybe they pay 75% of graduate tuition in their career field area of study. Maybe they pay 100%, maybe it's 50%. A lot of that is possible, if not common and sought after in those career fields. So when you're looking for jobs, look and see what kind of benefits they have if you want to keep going to graduate school or if you want to go past where you're currently at in your education level. I talk about institutions of higher education as well. A lot of colleges and universities will have their full-time, permanent or exempt employees have a benefit of a tuition waiver or a tuition reduction for their programs. So, for example, the way that I earned my master's degree was by working at an institution where after I'd worked there for a year, I was able to have free tuition for up to 6 credits a semester. And I took my master's degree part-time. I only did 6 credits a semester. Took me a little bit longer than it would have if I was doing it full-time, but it was paid for. It was paid for by my employee benefits. So that's the only way I was able to make it. Now, I encourage you only to go that route if you're actually interested in working in higher education. It's not going to be a good experience for you overall if you're only doing that to try and get that benefit, and it will affect your performance in that job, which affects your graduate school performance, which affects everything. So be interested in some aspect of higher education or the aspect that you'll be working in if you're going to go this route. It made sense for me. I wanted to work in higher education, so I got a undergraduate level position and was able to earn my master's at the same time in higher education and student affairs. And the last thing I'll talk about is working for a government agency or institution. A lot of times, especially with the federal government, if you're a full-time employee, you will have a tuition benefit as well, whether it's a discount or a full tuition benefit towards a master's degree in your field. So if you are looking to work in public affairs and those master's degrees are kind of hard to fund, or even public health, spend a year or two working with the federal government or a department, one of their departments, or sometimes even a state level government. And, you can earn that benefit towards free tuition. So that's kind of, double boon there. You are getting valuable work experience in your field and you're getting graduate school funded. And if you stay there afterwards, you still have a job, but you'll be earning more because you have your master's degree. So you just kind of set yourself up really well there for a lot of different options and a lot of routes to success. So think about these things, and if you need to find different levels of funding that you don't think you can get enough of through fellowships or scholarships or assistantships, there are different routes to graduate school that can be just as beneficial to you. Okay, so that's kind of all I had for you structure-wise today. You can always talk with me individually. I have appointments available through Starfish, which you can access on my Mercer. I'm happy to talk with you about how to find funding for your degree personally, as well as applying to the graduate school in general, writing your personal statement, how to find good programs for what you want to study. Anything related to graduate school, I'm happy to work with you on. I also help with personal statements, so feel free to email me at any point with a draft of your personal statement, and I'm more than happy to give you feedback. I've listed here as well Dr. Cameron Kunzelman's name. He's the coordinator of fellowships and scholarships at the Office of Fellowships and Scholarships on campus. They usually focus on fellowships and scholarships for students who are in their undergraduate level of education. But if you're not quite going to graduate school or you want to do a Fulbright, for example, he may be able to help you out. So don't be afraid to reach out there as well.